So there's a new Republican House coming in. Fred Upton has already said he's going to have Julius Genachowski at the Energy and Commerce Committee as his first hearing about this. Chances are they're not going to act in the way that you want them to act.
That's possible. We do have also a Democratic Senate. I mean, look, normally these issues have not been partisan. They've been bipartisan issues. It's really only of recent vintage where these have become highly partisan issues. I do think, you know, and Chairman Upton, I think, is a very sensible person. I do think if you get a couple people from each party saying, look, this agency is really in a pickle here. It's trying to twist itself into knots to find the legal authority to do what it needs to do. All of our constituents want broadband, and that's the thing, particularly if you're a rural senator or a member, a House member from a rural area, you want your constituents to have broadband. Right now, it's uncertain whether the FCC can do that under its legal authority.
Well, I want to bring in another voice, and this is Brett Glass, and he is with Lariat ISP in Laramie, Wyoming. Mr. Glass, if you would, tell us about your company and tell us how the FCC's decision yesterday, in your view, affects your company.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
We're listening.
Yes. Okay. Lariat, which is the company which I operate here in Laramie, Wyoming, is a rural wireless internet provider. We were the world's first internet provider. We were doing this back in 1992. And one thing that we're concerned about with the regulations is that there was some talk earlier in the program about permission to innovate. If the regulations that the FCC has just passed were in force when we started, we might not have had permission to innovate to do what we want to do. The regulations, we haven't seen all of them yet. We've only got the gist from the staff of the FCC. We're concerned that they would actually outlaw the rate plans which are most popular with our rural customers, which make broadband affordable to the people who get our wireless service. And so we're very worried. We're also very worried about what will happen with investors. A number of investors have backed out of funding us and our attempts to reach even farther into rural areas because they're very concerned that the FCC regulation will make it infeasible for us to do that. So we haven't seen the final text of the rules yet. As a matter of fact, right now I'm taking a break. I'm actually out installing internet on the roof of a building in a rural area. But we're very concerned about what may happen.
But Mr. Glass, if I could, the FCC yesterday in their vote kept wireline and wireless separate. So would you like to see some regulation on the wireless side?
Actually, what the FCC said that it would do, and again, we don't have the rules in our hands, what the FCC said is that it gave a specific exemption to mobile wireless. In other words, the kind of broadband that you might get on your cell phone. They did not exempt fixed wireless, which is what we do, from the most onerous rules, and that's one of the reasons why we're worried. Wireless is different from wireline. It has more constraints, and in some ways, the wireless which we provide has even greater constraints because we use unlicensed spectrum. We're not large companies which have access to licensed spectrum, which is very expensive to obtain. And as a result, we are hurt even more than the mobile wireless companies are, but we have stricter regulations than them. So we don't believe that the rules as they stand are fair.
There's another voice, Dean Garfield. What did you hear from Mr. Glass?
Actually, very little in reality. It's the same point that I made earlier about how far we've come in a relatively short period of time in my mind. I know Gigi disagreed earlier, but we could easily spend another 10 years arguing about the points of disagreement. And what I offer is that we're much better off focusing on the points where we agree, as the FCC did, and then allow, particularly on mobile, the market to continue to develop. And then rather than making decisions based on hypotheticals, let's make decisions based on how the market actually transforms over the next few years. This is truly, it's not the beginning, because we've been debating these issues for over 5 years, but it's certainly not the end.
Gigi Sohn, were you disappointed with Michael Kopp's vote yesterday?
No, absolutely not. Look, something was better than nothing, and I think he feared that if he did not vote yes, the chairman might be willing to actually not vote the item at all, and that we would be left for the next 2 years with no protections at all. So it's a start. It's a step in the right direction, but as we fear, the devil is going to be in the details, and the FCC is going to have to figure out the details on all the critically important questions of what it means to have an open internet. For example, paid prioritization, wireless. The rules are either silent, ambiguous, or actually contradict what we understand to be in the text of the order. The text of the order is supposedly 90 pages long, 80 or 90 pages long.
But nobody's seen it?
Nobody has seen it, no.
The commissioners obviously have,
Right.
but we haven't.
But you know, we knew what the framework they were starting from was the Waxman proposal, which was never introduced because the Republicans wouldn't agree to it. So we kind of knew it was there to begin with. So we weren't starting from zero.
Well, Michael Kopp spoke yesterday, and he was one of the he was the iffy vote at one point. Here's a little bit of what Commissioner Kopp had to say.
There is more that I would have liked in this order. I would have preferred a general ban to discourage broadband providers from engaging in pay for priority, prioritizing the traffic of those with deep pockets who would consign the rest of us to a slower, second-class internet. I also believe we should have done more to strip loopholes from the definition of broadband internet access service to prevent companies falsely claiming they are not broadband companies from slipping through. We made some improvements on the definition, but I still have some worries. I also argued for real parity between fixed and mobile, read wireline and wireless, technologies. After all, the internet is the internet, no matter how you access it. And the millions of citizens going mobile nowadays for their internet and the entrepreneurs creating innovative wireless content, applications, and services should have the same freedoms and protections as those in the wired context.
Gigi Sum.
Well, I think Michael Kopp's is dead on. These rules fall short in fully protecting consumers. That being said, I think he did the right thing in voting for it. We're going to have to hope that the FCC strongly enforces these rules, and I will thank the FCC for setting up a complaint process where complaints are considered and dealt upon very, very quickly, a so-called rocket docket, and that's good. But my concern is, what about the next FCC and the FCC after that? So these rules are wide open to interpretation, and depending on what your ideology is, they're either going to be interpreted in a way that protects consumers or a way that doesn't.
Well, you're both lawyers, and Commissioner McDowell, the other Republican commissioner on the, along with Meredith Atwell-Baker, talked about some of the legal arguments made by this decision.
Despite the desires of some, Congress has not established a new title of the Act to police Internet network management, not even implicitly. The absence of statutory authority is perhaps why members of Congress introduced legislation to give the FCC such powers. In other words, if the Act already gave the Commission the legal tether it seeks, why was legislation needed in the first place? I'm afraid that this leaky ship of an order is attempting to sail through a regulatory fog without the necessary ballast of factual or legal substance. The courts will easily sink it. In another act of legal sleight of hand, the order claims that it does not attempt to classify broadband services as Title II common carrier services. Yet functionally, that is precisely what the majority is attempting to do to Title I information services, Title III licensed wireless services, and Title VI video services by subjecting them to non-discrimination obligations in the absence of a congressional mandate.
Dean Garfield.
There are a lot of metaphors there. They all work. Look, he's certainly right that there's a lot of legal uncertainty in this area. And for too long, we've spent a lot of time arguing about process Title I versus Title II. I think we're much better off focusing on what's going to benefit consumers, what's going to benefit innovation, what's going to benefit continued investment in this area, and rather than focusing on Title I versus Title II. I could say unequivocally that our members were opposed to Title II reclassification because we live in a world where these services are certainly not exactly the same as your traditional telephony services, and so should be treated differently. That being said, it's time to focus less on process and more on finding solutions that will lead to continued innovation and investment in this area.
So Rob McDowell is quite the drama guy, isn't he? But I actually have to say I agree with at least part of what he said. I think the Title I theory that the FCC has adopted, as far as I know it, and they announced yesterday, is a very leaky ship. And they're going to have a very, very difficult time in court justifying it. We would have preferred that the FCC reverse its decision from 2002 and reclassify Internet Access Service, broadband Internet Access Service, as a Title II telecommunications service. We think that would have been a much firmer legal foundation for this decision. So it's going to be difficult. I think we're going to try to help the FCC support its decision, but I think it's going to be difficult. It will depend on what 3 judges they get, what federal court they go back to. If they go back to the D.C. Circuit, where they lost their authority in April, I think it's going to be a very, very tough slog, and that, you know, if you get the wrong 3 judges, they're going to think that they're trying to evade what this Comcast decision told them to do. If we go to